Welcome to The Point, the show where minds meet, hearts touch, and voices are freed from silence to tell it like it is. The Point brings you a different perspective on today's issues and interests, hosted by purposeful, passionate, and powerful African American women. Now here's your main host, legendary journalist, Dr. Barbara Reynolds.
The nation's capital is the world's superpower. It houses the world's most sophisticated fighting forces and spends multi-billions to protect U.S. citizens' property and confiscated oil around the world. The district has virtually the highest paid teachers, scores of agencies, courts, and law enforcement agencies, all charged with protecting children. And yet, children can't depend upon adults to keep them safe from predators and murderers. Children die in plain sight with no one caring enough to save them. Not school officials, not neighbors, not relatives, no one. I'm talking about the 4 children who allegedly died recently at the hands of their own mother, Benita Jacks. Her 4 children were starved, stabbed, and strangled. Their decomposed bodies lay for months in the upstairs bedrooms where they were murdered. The smell coming from their row house was stifling, but not enough to raise alarm. I should say someone did care. A social worker from a charter school where one of the children attended, she called the D.C. Child and Family Service Agency and told officials that she believed abuse was occurring at the Jacks' home. But the agency just closed the case anyway, one less folder to bother with, out of sight and out of mind. You might say, well, that's just one family. But there were 34 other violent deaths of children in 2006 in D.C., all African American. Even one child should not suffer with none of the great powers all around us available and accessible to their pain. Sure, the bureaucracy of D.C. failed. I've been in the city some 25 years, and its record for protecting children has always been dismal. But there should be a higher principle at work than bureaucracy. It is something called love. We're parents, we're teachers, we're neighbors, we're coaches, meter readers, mail carriers, and mall watchers. Most often in abuse cases, there are signs before the dying. Maybe it was a parent that began acting crazy, or a child arriving at school unkempt, hair uncombed, bruised, or hungry. Or maybe you see a child being punched by an adult in the mall. Say something, do something. Blaming things or systems might make us feel better, but bureaucracies are often hiding places for scoundrels. All of us must be our children's keepers. We must rid ourselves of a culture that is hostile to children. We must become a society where children can trust us to keep them safe. If we can't ensure the safety of our children, we do not deserve the status of a superpower. While we protect others across the world, we are allowing the neglect of our children, and that's a crime, and that's a sin, and that's a shame, and that's my point, and I'm Dr. Barbara A. Reynolds. With me to discuss more about violence against children, our panelists, Unita Winkie, an Arlington, Virginia high school teacher, Martine Moore, a mother in elementary school administrator in Valencia, Muhammad, a reporter for the Afro-American who has had 2 children murdered in D.C. We're going to continue the discussion of the Benita Jacks case, how children can die in plain sight, get lost in the system in D.C. And we're going to continue this discussion with Martine Moore, who is a fashion designer and commentator and has a 13-year-old son.
Yes.
Valencia Muhammad, star reporter of the Afro-American newspaper, and who's lost 2 children to violence in D.C. And Unita Winkie, who is a business teacher in the Arlington public school system nearby. Just start the conversation of you've been reporting, so bring us in on what you have found out in the Jacks case.
In the Jacks case, one of the things I found out is that after our mayor, Adrian Fenty, abruptly fired several of the social workers that were involved in the case, that over 100 of the social workers in protest wore black in support of their fellow, fellow employees, workers or whatever. And the fact that when he called them in, hundreds of them in for a meeting, that many of them walked out. They said more than 50% of them walked out, didn't want to hear anything that he had to say, because of the fact that they know that these were the rules that were put in place when he chaired the committee on the council that was responsible for child welfare services. So they saw it as a very big slap in the face. And what I've known from these kind of things that have happened before is that when the superintendents, the chancellors, and the mayors take action like this, that what happens is the people eventually get their jobs back because of the manner in which it was done. So it may be 2 years from now, and it may not hit the press, but eventually, and I'm almost positive to guarantee that those social workers that were fired, according to the union rules and regulations, will be able to get their full pay back and damages, as well as their positions.
Now, we know that there have been, of course, many killings, murders of children in the district. Between 1976 and 2002, there were 575 children who were killed, and 31% by their fathers, 30% by mothers. And this does not even go on to tell about the gun violence and the violence on the streets. Now, Martine, you have a 13-year-old son named Harry. And I just want to know, how do you feel about his safety growing up in the district?
Well, I'm fortunate in that he has a father who's very active in his life, and that truly makes a difference. He's 24 with him. He's with him more than with me during the week, which is crucial time. And I know that that's a blessing that I have, that he's in his life like that. Because I work also at the Howard University Middle School of Mathematics and Science, and you can see the different element apparent. You meet the children, you see the children, and then after a while you're like, I see why that child is like that.
So, we've been talking about politics, but I think you put your finger on something, is that we can't think that the political system can always fix what's happening with our children, that we have to have the parents, we have to have neighbors, we have to have people who are concerned about our children. It's not going to fall from the sky, any proposal, this is how you fix it. It's going to have to be something like involvement and love. Now, Anita, you work in the school system, and I was wondering, are there things that you could see about the children that might send off an alarm that something's wrong? What are some of the signs that a teacher like you could see in the classroom that something's wrong here and I better go farther and check this thing out?
Well, you have attendance, you have behavior, if the student comes into class, and then academics always. If you have a student that's doing their work and all of a sudden their grades start to fall, there's something going on. And behavior, you have a kid that comes in the classroom and gets along with their peers, mostly happy-go-lucky kid, and all of a sudden they're irritable, don't want to be bothered, withdrawn from their peers or even with you. Those are some of the warning signs. And just being vigilant and just knowing your students.